Hello, and welcome to the Close the Loop podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Deeney, and today we're going to be talking about what should a small business be looking for in an agency? What kind of a relationship should they be looking for? What kind of services should they be looking for? What should they be expecting when they start thinking, should we go outside? Should we bring someone in? Should we get extra help in, this project we want to do? Should we build a partnership so that we're more entwined? Do I just need this one thing made really quick? There's a lot of different types of agencies. There's a lot of different types of relationships a business may have with a third party. To help me dive into this is David Baer. David is a veteran of the direct response marketing time of, it's still going now, but he's a veteran of it. He's really done a lot of it. He started his career selling classical music subscriptions. Very interesting. And that was on the dawn of email marketing as well. Since then, his copy and his strategic guidance have earned his employers and clients millions in sales. So he's someone who's been in the agency world. I think someone who has also been there and through ups and downs of the agency time. So I thought he'd be a great resource to talk about this. So welcome, David. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Kevin. Thanks so much for having me.
So if we could, I always like to start as simple as I possibly can. When we're talking about an agency, right? I sort of touched on it, but what, I guess in your eyes, David, like what is an agency? What are we talking about today when we're like using the word agency?
Yeah, I think it's a catch-all term, and really, it can be anything from a one-person business to a business where there's a full what's known as a full stack agency, which is an organization that really can do every implementation of tactical activity in marketing, whether it's running ads or doing your copywriting or designing a website or doing print media or what's known as outdoor media, which is like billboards and things. There are businesses that do all of that. And then there's everything in between. And something in between might be a small shop where it's a bunch of outsourced people who are contractors when they're brought in, as needed basis. There's also, and we'll dive into the pros and cons of this, a lot of overseas outsourcing that's happening these days, particularly in the 2 years leading up to now since COVID, where the world has gotten a lot smaller because there's so much more accessibility to people across the globe who have, amazing skills and talents at much lower prices. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, as we move forward.
Yeah, I've always looked at an agency as we're talking about it, like support for the business in the marketing arm. But there's a lot of businesses that partner with other businesses that have more of an operational arm or supply chain, right? There's lots of interesting ways businesses work with other businesses, but what all of those entities that work with another entity have in common to me is like the business's number one priority is the business's success. Whereas any partner or entity that works with that business may not have that business as the number one priority, but that's why they're separate. That's why they're working. They're offering services or something to help that business. And in that line, right, the closer aligned that agency or business is with the primary company in achieving the primary business's goals, the better off I think both will be, because they're going to be helping support, what they both are trying to achieve. But primarily when you're an owner, when you're a business, small business, let's say, thinking about, I'd like to have a partner or a business help me, support me, get help with my marketing. An agency is sort of where my head goes with that.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, the terminology agency is really about a service provider and sometimes an external expert. And again, this is something I think we're going to be digging a lot deeper into. Who has a skill set to be able to deliver something for a client that the client may not be able to or may not be interested in doing internally in their business.
Yeah, so you just touched on it. Maybe you can expand a little bit more. Why would a business want to hire an agency, a marketing agency?
There's a long list of answers to that question. And it could be anything from, they don't know a darn thing about marketing and need somebody who does, to they don't have the bandwidth internally in their business, whether they don't have the expertise. They don't have the time. They have not dedicated a full-time person to do marketing, and they've sort of reached the cap of what the person who's 10% of their day or 10% of their week is allocated to marketing activities. They may, and this is probably among the most common, particularly in the small business world, they may realize that marketing, which a lot of small businesses define as either lead generation or advertising, and there's a lot more to marketing than that, they may say, oh, it's about time that we actually spend money on ads. We're not getting enough business right now. And so they'll see that there's something happening in the environment around them that is sort of a point at which they need to make a decision to make this investment, but they don't know what to do. So they turn to a professional to help guide them through it. And an extension of that is they have heard that, tactic X, these days it's TikTok. That's the hot thing as we happen to be recording this. Advertising on TikTok is the way to build your business, right? And so they reach out to somebody who is an expert in whatever that thing is, that's been recommended to them, often by somebody who's not fully informed about all of their needs within their business. And so it may or may not be the right thing to do.
Yeah. Now, something that we've talked about, before we were sitting here today for recording this was something you'd mentioned about like the commoditization of agency tactics, of agencies sort of having a specialized lead gen focus, and that kind of getting out of hand in the terms of like lots of agencies have that. So if you could talk a little bit about that, because when a business is thinking about an agency, right, is like better to just like have a relationship where it's fairly disconnected, let the agency just run its specialized tactic of lead gen and not connect them to the inner workings of the business? I mean, in your experience, seems like this is something you could absolutely be able to share your insights on. And it's something we had talked about before, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I have been in both roles of running an agency as well as hiring agencies. And now, these days, I actually work to improve agencies who are my clients. One of the big challenges is that a lot of agencies have historically been positioned around a specific skill set. And so you said lead generation, for example. And frankly, that's how both the marketing and advertising industry has worked in terms of let's focus on the thing we specialize in, the thing we deliver. And it's absolutely how businesses have been trained to think about purchasing marketing or advertising services, right? So let me explain what I mean by this, and then we'll get back to answering your question. Typically, a business does not have the way that they have a financial guide through an accountant, or a legal guide through an attorney, somebody who guides them through the ins and outs of marketing. Instead, what they do is they engage directly with a sales professional who's representing a specific solution. That might be the person who's selling advertising time or space for a radio or newspaper, or it might be the local rep for, Yelp, somebody who specializes in running ads on a certain platform, whether that's online or offline. But what they're not engaging with is typically the bigger picture of, well, what's right for my business? What strategically should I be doing? And so because most agencies are positioned around the tactics, a Facebook ads agency, a search engine optimization agency, a website design agency, and because, as I said earlier, we are now so much more accessible across the globe, well, in the marketing world, we now have competitors in other countries that have different financial standards of living, where somebody can charge a heck of a lot less and be qualified to do the work. at a much lower price. Now, whether it's here domestically in North America or in Pakistan or India or the Philippines or Nigeria or any other country where people have the ability to live on a lot less money, there's also a wide range of quality that you get for whatever you pay. So that's a completely different point, and I want to make sure that's clear. So this is a big challenge for both business owners as well as those who are in the agency world to how do you differentiate yourself outside of price, obviously, to be able to figure out, I'm investing in a commodity here. Is that really the right service provider? Is it the right solution for my business? It's a much more complicated subject than most businesses really take the time to think about.
And it makes me think that there's like a lot of things in a business that they may think like, like this agency is helping me with this. I wonder if they could help me with that. There's areas where an agency probably could be a little more invested in the strategic side of a business if allowed. I know that from being in an agency, that was scary for the businesses that we worked with. And from being in a business, like feeling like, I don't know if we're going to be able to get the agency up to speed or on the same page as us. Like there's that, I don't know, that worry and that fear on both sides. And so like what you're talking about is being able to overcome that and have the agency be a little more entwined in the strategic operations of the business so that truly its goals and how it's helping the business is optimized and does have a little bit wider of a connection in the business. And the business allows them and gives them the tools or the information, the knowledge equity they have, which kind of only exists in that business and enables to allow the agency or their, the team on the other side to be able to do something with that, right?
Yeah, you said something there that I want to come back to, which is a business will think, I have this agency and I want this other thing done. I wonder if they can do it too. And I'll tell you what that experience was like from an agency owner's perspective. So I used to run an agency. I started back in 2010, and our focus was Facebook ads, right? Back in 2010, this was a fairly new thing. And I had a good number of clients who would hire me because, again, that was the hot new thing at that time, the way TikTok is now. I had people who came to hire me to run Facebook ads or just to figure out this whole Facebook thing. And then I would, have a subsequent meeting with them a few months down the road, or talk about the success of or the challenges around the campaign that we were running, and inevitably they would tell me about some other thing that they were doing in marketing. Typically because I was trying to get to what was behind the work that I was doing with them, like what were the next steps and what's the follow up and all those sorts of things. And they would tell me something along the lines of, oh, you'd be so proud of me. I just hired somebody to. And then they would say, basically, this is what I heard. Do something that I could have hired you to do, but you didn't tell me you did it. And I didn't ask.
Oh, man. So how did that feel? How did that go?
Well, it felt terrible because I realized, well, I've made a mistake here because I haven't been clear to my client the full range of things that I can do for them. And I really set up the relationship around something that undermined what they think our relationship is about and what they think my area of expertise is. And so that was actually a big shift in the way that I structured my business. Once I saw that as a pattern that kept being repeated, I was like, I got to do something about this because clearly I'm doing something wrong, that these guys are going somewhere else and then proudly telling me I hired somebody else to do something.
That's really, and see it happening over again or a couple times. It's like, okay, I'm getting the signal. So you mentioned something about relationships there too. And to me, the relationship that it's, let's say, simplest, right, is something you've referred to before is a vendor type relationship. Like the most basic I could possibly see is like, you hand me like things that are completed, or you hand me the leads, or, it's very vendor based, like put money in, something comes out. And that's really the limited amount of interaction that's there, just like the bare minimum. Now, along, let's say, the spectrum, you increase the relationship quality. And at the far end, I would say it's something kind of like what's been described to me as like they almost have like a at seat at the table. Like they have a seat in the decision table. Like they may go, before we do anything, let's talk to my partner. Let's talk. Like that's the quality of relationship at one end of the spectrum that's very ingrained, very much established. Like there's trust there. There's also like a good healthy sense of like, you know what, let's just make sure that this is going to work best for the business and not like, leave parts of ourselves out, which like if an agency has that sort of a relationship, any partnership has that sort of relationship, that's amazing. So between vendor, if you want to describe again, and then all the way to like the far side, you see it, how does that go?
Okay, well, this is a loaded topic, and it's a topic which I'm incredibly passionate about, and in fact have built an entire business around now, supporting and working with agencies. So let me tell you about the typical agency. And again, there's plenty of exceptions to this, but the typical agency basically says, "Yeah, I can help you with Facebook ads. Yeah, I can help you with SEO. So tell me, what would you like to do?" And that's where it ends, right? They are relying still on the business to guide the strategy around that particular tactic. Okay. So for a business that is really just looking to outsource their team and hire somebody who is a contractor to fulfill some very specific task that they've figured out internally exactly what they want to do, this approach works. But for most businesses, they haven't actually figured that stuff out, right? They don't know what is the best way to run ads. What types of ads should I run? What should the goal of this campaign be? How should I structure it in terms of the interaction with the person who does click? Should I be collecting leads, or should I send somebody right into, a sales process? If I'm going to have a form for them to fill out, what's the nature of the data that I'm collecting there? Where's too much friction versus, not enough information? Where's the right balance? Now, most businesses don't know that stuff. And sadly, most marketers don't tend to get that deep into thinking through all of the types of questions. And there's a lot more, right? Like, are they joining an email list, and how many emails are being sent out to follow up on getting them to move through this short-term initial nurture? What is it that's being said to them, et cetera, which is going to inform who are we targeting and all of those things. That's really not something that a typical service provider is trained to or really thinks through. What they are really good at is the delivery of the technical, tactical work. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, what you've just described is what I would refer to as a trusted advisor. And that's the relationship that I said, earlier, most businesses have a trusted advisor around certain activities in their business. It might be around financial management. It might be around legal issues. It might be around operational or organizational structure. Where they tend to lack having a trusted advisor is in marketing and or sales. And frankly, I believe sales is a subcategory of marketing. And therefore would be well positioned to invest in somebody to help hold their hand or guide them through it if they don't have those resources internally. Now, what's in between is where I think there's a lot of agencies that lie. And this is something that I think is important to stress, because as I browse through lots of agency websites, I see some lip service to the word strategy. And I talk to a lot of agency owners who believe they are strategists. And when I try to dig into what they actually mean by that, well, it's one of a few things. It's either that they are strategists of a particular tactic. So they are, website optimization strategists. They are, search engine optimization strategists. They are YouTube, strategists, whatever it might be. But they are not holistic business growth or revenue growth strategists, which ultimately is what the agency's job is. It's to drive more revenue to the business. That might start with lead generation, but ultimately there's all the steps that happen after lead generation that an agency can and often should be involved in if they're going to be able to deliver the best value to the business overall. And the business goals are usually not more leads. The business goals are more or consistent or predictable revenue.
What's really interesting there is like how much the agency side of that feels like it's so right on the ball, because like when you have a little bit more of the customer journey for a business and you can see, okay, here's how the business is making money. Here's how the business wants to make money. Here's how things are flowing. Here's like areas where we can strategically help and influence the business. On the total flip other side of that is the business opening their doors to the agency. So why would a business struggle? Why do businesses struggle opening their doors and letting that level of a relationship develop with an agency?
Well, first, I think it is in part because they don't know any better, right? The way that they have been trained, as I explained before, is really about, the sales of a tactic. And so if nobody has said, hey, there's a holistic approach that you could be taking, right? Nobody is out there promoting that as the better route, right? And when I say nobody, there's very few of us who are out there promoting that, but there's a sea of people who are saying this tactic, that tactic, right? And so I think in part it's because that's just how all of us, both in the marketing industry and in the business owner world, have been trained. So I think that's the biggest piece. Now, I have rarely encountered a business owner who, when we sort of break down the opportunity that they have to not be tactical first, but rather strategic first, right? That they go, no, I'm good. Just send me leads. And so I think that it's really that they're just not having the right conversation and not being presented with the right information.
Gotcha. So here's one that comes from kind of my experience. So here's a question for you. So how important is it that the business understand what the agency is going to be executing? The strategy, the tactics, the whole execution? Because there were times in my experience where like I felt like, how am I going to be able to explain this? Some of this gets kind of nitty gritty. And at the same time, maybe high level isn't going to be impressive enough. Maybe this won't explain the value that we're providing enough. There's a balance there. And I know some business leaders are different than others. So but I'd say in general, how important is it that the business really understands what the agency is trying to execute for them?
I don't think that the individual specific tactical activity is critical for them to know in detail. However, if they don't, again, it's all about foundation and perception. So the foundation of the relationship is, I'm investing in this agency's work, and we have agreed that here is the strategic approach we are taking to, this outcome that we have both defined and agreed upon. And then I'm putting it in their hands to execute on the tactics that they either have said are going to be the right tactics to achieve that strategic approach. Businesses don't need to get into the weeds with that stuff. Now, they're welcome to if they want to, but if you approach it that way, where there's an understanding about sort of the bigger picture and how this activity fits into it, you get a lot less pushback or resistance from a business, because we've sort of worked together to come up with the big overarching plan that this is a piece of. If, however, they don't have that foundation that they've bought into, well, then it's a heck of a lot more challenging for them to, be presented with something and then turn to the agency and look at it and go, why the heck are we doing this?
Right. Like I remember sending over, we were like, well, we agree we're going to test ads, and we have something like 12 segments. So if we're going to test them, we need, at least minimum one control, one test. So with 12, that meant 24. And we were like, okay, we're going to be sending over the 24 the 24 total things over to you, and they're like, man, that seems like a lot. Don't worry about it. And then later on, they saw an ad, they saw one of them, and they're like, I didn't approve this. There was like that. And so like for me, it was like a dance of, okay, how much of this does need to be approved and looked at every little granular bit. And then to the other extent, like I work with some who are like, great, fine, just tell me at the end of the month how things are working. So that relationship, finding, I guess, the tone of that relationship, the pulse, the pace, the need for the things explained was definitely something that you kind of have to get used to or learn as you go from the agency perspective.
I'd say that a lot of businesses would be very happy to just hand off everything to an agency and not think about it. But in fact, the work that the agencies are doing on the business's behalf are the driver to continuing to stay in business and to grow. And so it's kind of misplaced to have marketing be an afterthought for the leadership in a business. That said, most agencies also put themselves in the position of a situation like the one that you've just described, because I'm going to assume that the relationship was not based on full understanding or buy-in on the part of the client of exactly what needed to be done to achieve their goals, what the individual pieces were to achieve their goal. And frankly, it probably, the 24 ads were not presented in the context of, here's the process that we pursue, and we're going to be split testing, and there's a reason we have this many ads, because there are all these different permutations and potential directions that we may go or may discover are going to be winning messaging or winning visuals. And so we want to make sure that we find the best one that's going to minimize your investment on a per action basis, per lead, per click, per whatever, so that we ultimately have a great campaign built for you. Now, if that was stated in advance of handing somebody 24 ads to review, do you think maybe they would have had a different response?
Right. Yeah. Like understanding, having the right expectations in the process and what's involved, and knowing ahead of time a little bit, like here's like the context around what I'm asking, so that you have a better understanding of it. Makes total sense. So let's say a business today has an agency, right? And they're listening to this and they're going, how does my relationship with my agency, where does it fit into this spectrum? So what would you say are things that a business should today be looking at its agency and going, is this the right relationship? Is this the right agency? Is this the right strategic combination of things that I need from the agency to be successful? Or should I go, maybe I just have a basic vendor type relationship? How would they know that? What would help a business sort of evaluate that?
Yeah, so I think maybe we talked briefly about the difference between strategies and tactics. I've made the assumption that our listening audience knows what I mean by each of those words. But taking a strategic and systematic approach to marketing is really what I'm endorsing, and saying that agencies really need to play an active role in the bigger picture, if the business doesn't already have their hands and minds wrapped around that already. And so when I say strategy, what I mean is, how do you get from where you currently are, your what I call as is state, to where you want to get to, the to be state? And when you think about all of the internal, organizational, operational, and external competition, marketplace, etc., influences, the environmental influences, right? Those are things that are going to inform what tactically you invest in. So if I'm a business and I want to grow, my revenue threefold, okay, and I know that there's a certain market segment that I haven't gone after that is going to help me get there, well, there's a set of tactics that I can include and I can rule out, because I know that I want to go after these particular people and I want to put this particular offer in front of them. And oh, by the way, these are people who might be willing to pay more. So maybe I'm going to strategically consider my pricing structure for this new offer, right? Those are a lot of pieces that an agency can and should have some involvement in, whether it's full ownership or whether it's participation in the planning. But if your current agency isn't really privy to these types of things, or your organization, your business hasn't really thought through either the strategic and systematic approach to all of this, well, that's where I think you need to go to an agency that you're currently working with and say, I heard some guy on some podcast somewhere say some stuff that sounded really like a good idea. Maybe we should have a conversation. And I think that's a good starting point, because is that clear, Kevin, the difference between where I think most businesses and agencies are sitting right now and where they have the potential to sit?
Yeah, I think it made me feel like you're looking a little bit more long-term, but not just long-term, right? You're also looking at it like, here are the areas of the business that are opportunities for growth, how to execute on all those things, but not just in a narrow way, but because anytime a business puts resources into something, there's almost always like a secondary impact of doing that. Like the way I understand it is like, sure, I'm going to run ads, I'm going to run leads, but what about the team that's going to get them? How do we know they're going to work? How do we know that we're hitting them right? How do we know that those things are being, moved through and being sold and they align with what the business wanted? That gets a little more operational, which gets a little more strategic. Like, yes, we want to, get leads from this group. Tactically, let's send some emails, but how we treat them, what we want to put in them, does it align with what's already on our website? There's a lot of things from the wider picture that need to be like confirmed or checked on, or just supported in a business that goes to asking a lot more questions. And it feels like the agency needs to be very much asking lots of questions to be able to get the information they need. And the business could be thinking, this might be helpful for them to know, or this is, yes, I'm going to answer, I'm going to help them find their strategic area, instead of like trying to make it like, you're just going to live in a black box. That's sort of what it makes me think about.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was sort of thinking about in preparation for our conversation today was, how does a business shop for an agency? And you brought up a really important point. An agency which asks the right questions is the agency that impresses me, right? And so what do I mean by the right questions? Well, I want to know more than, what's your budget and how many leads do you want me to send you a month, or some, variation on that theme, right? What I really want to hear an agency ask me as a business owner is to really get a full needs assessment. Let me tell you what I mean by this. Okay. And again, this is what we train our agency licensees to do, which is look into a business's full range of revenue generating activities and dig into them, because what they could uncover could make, the engagement of that agency potentially the best investment ever. So let's talk about sort of how a standard typical business structure works with services business. I mean, this could work with retail business, e-commerce business, basically any place where there's relationship with the buyer, where that influences. So it's not really brand relationship, but business owner or employee relationship, or even an e-commerce website relationship with a consumer. So obviously there's the where are the leads coming from? How are we getting the leads to the business in the first place? If you're doing a good job of that as a business, or are you capturing leads from people who come to your website, into your store, etc.? I know so many stories that I could share of times that I was in a retail shop and asking lots of questions, And this happened to me not too long ago. I was in a hat shop, and I remember it was like, 4:45. They were closing at 5 o'clock. I had some, deep questions. I was asking about some reasonably expensive merchandise that they had. We were leading toward a sale, and they basically said, "Hey, we're closing up. I'm not, and I got to run out of here. I don't have the time to answer all of your questions. Do you want to come back another time? We can finish this." Okay, sure. And I left. Now, they had no idea who I was. They had no guarantee I was ever going to come back. They were the one who ended the conversation. They didn't capture the lead, right? They had so much opportunity to. Once you do capture leads, the next question is really, do you have a way to nurture that relationship as you're trying to move them forward in a buying relationship, right? You want to get them to move from being a lead, being a prospective customer, to becoming a customer. And very often businesses will ignore those who are not ready to buy now and forget about them. And very often, I don't remember the exact statistic, but in the car industry, most people who are shopping for cars don't buy right away. It's something like 9 to 12 months down the road. And here in 2022, given the issue of inventory availability, it might even be further down the road. No pun intended. If once you do nurture them to the point of them being ready to buy, do you have systems in place to convert that sale? Do you have onboarding systems in place? Do you have systems around customer delight to make sure that you are building a relationship with somebody who then wants to champion your business, wants to invest further in what you have to offer? Do you have systems that are going to easily and appropriately present additional offers to them based on who they are, right? That are programmatic around what they bought this, maybe now they should buy that, right? Like Amazon does, recommending, hey, people who bought this also bought that. You want that too? Do you have systems in place around managing and orchestrating referrals? These are all places where an agency could have the opportunity to engage with and support the business's revenue growth overall. And so any agency that is talking about that stuff, well, I would be super excited to have a deeper conversation with them, because they really get the big picture, whereas most agencies are focusing on a much, much narrower area within that.
Well, I guess like what you've just said makes me think, okay, yeah, that sounds really golden. That sounds really awesome. At the same time, I want to make sure that I understand it right too. What sort of requirement does having a better relationship with an agency put on the business? Like that also sounds like it may need, a meeting or a couple meetings, or, opening your doors to the agency may mean, some of your team will need to have some meetings with the agency so they have a really good understanding of either the product, the service, what is being delivered, what makes it unique, like maybe a regular ongoing meeting with the owner or with executive leadership or something like. And for the small business, I know I've heard this where they go, I barely have time as it is. So like the relationship is going to be limited by my availability, my time, which is tough because they may go, I'd love that relationship to be better. I just don't know if I can carve out the time because operationally, organizationally, in the way my business is being run today, I'm just overtaxed in time. So it's like, should a business think about what is going to be required of them when they enter like the kind of relationship or enter into having an agency support them? Because there are, I think, some requirements that will be beneficial for both of them, but they both have to be willing to do that, to go there, right?
So you're absolutely right. And, there's this factor involved here called human nature, right? And I think, where I would go with that is many businesses and business owners are never, ever going to have the willingness or capacity. And no, I should say willingness, because they can create capacity, right? But the willingness to create capacity to take this kind of approach on. And so it is much, much easier for us as humans to choose the option that is has less friction, has less required of us, even though we know that it may not result in the same quality of outcome. And so I would say, look, this is something that every business owner needs to look internally and say, is it that I don't have the time, or is it that I have chosen not to prioritize the time? And you can tell I've had this conversation with many a business owner because that's really, I think, where the answer lies. And again, I don't know too many business owners who are going to say, I heard some guy on a podcast who suggested that maybe I need to prioritize my time differently, and poof, I had an epiphany. But I hope that somebody does.
Hope it's inspiring. Okay, so now here's a little flip to this. The sort of alternative the way I see it to an agency is, and still having the need, right? The business needs is there, the needs are still present, and still wanting to achieve those, is to just bring people in-house. So the case is always there, right? Like in-house versus agency, third-party help support. And sometimes it's one and then another, get things going and then I'll switch to the other, or I'll do both. I think there's a lot of different paths a business could take. But what would you say about those paths and some of the, like, how do you look at a business who's like ultimately, it probably would serve us best to be more in-house, or maybe it would serve us best to have a combination, or to just utilize the strategic trusted advisor as you've described it. So how do you look at that landscape?
Yeah, I think that I am less an advocate of hiring agencies than I am an advocate of approaching your marketing strategically and systematically. And so if that means that you're going to run things in-house, and through your strategic development, you determine that there are things that need to be done tactically that you can either hire additional people for based on their skill set, or outsource to somebody based on their skill set, that's the way I would go. I don't think there's a real difference from my perspective on whether you should do it in-house or job it out to a partner. What I think is important is that you invest in your marketing with a bigger picture in mind. You said longer term. I think it's not just longer term, but considering all of the possible revenue generation options that you have, because a lot of businesses are simply not thinking as strategically as they could be about the goal that they have. So if the goal is make X amount of revenue, there's a lot of ways you can do that. And so it may be a pricing strategy. It may be, that you change the market focus. It may be, so many other things. And that has nothing to do with whether you have an agency or whether you have somebody in-house.
Okay. So let's say you're the business, small business that's decided, I want to go look to hire an agency that fits a more strategic model. Because I would like to have a more trusted position, and I want them to find and help me move forward with growth opportunities, revenue generating opportunities, just like you've just said. So what tips would you have for the business leadership, business owners in that, like, who are facing that and wanting to hire the right
Sure.
agent?
Well, if somebody has been sitting listening to everything I've been preaching and says, wow, I really love this stuff, well, then he should just come to us and find one of our licensees who's already doing all of this. That said, I think that, finding agencies which focus on a strategic approach is important, and understanding that that you need to vet them a little to understand if they are using lip service around the term strategy, or if they are actually invested in thinking through, the types of things that I've discussed, whether it's revenue generation overall, whether it's understanding the market and where they hang out, and therefore we're going to select these tactics versus those tactics. That's the type of thing that I think is really important for businesses to listen for as they're talking to different potential service providers, because you're going to get a sense of whether they really get it or whether they're just trying to sell the thing that they happen to do, which is really what so many marketing service providers and agencies do in reality, is find a reason to get that square peg in the round hole, no matter what. Because there's always, everybody always needs our solution, and therefore we're going to show them exactly how our solution is, always going to fit their need, right?
That is daunting. And I say that because it can be so easy to be sold to and be like there are great salespeople. There's great pitches. There's great, it might even be looked at what we're talking about right now sounds like a great pitch. But honestly, like getting, just like you said, vetting them enough, getting to, okay, they actually are invested in the strategic approach. Figuring that out does seem that's the daunting part, the way I'm feeling right now. That seems like it is a little difficult. And so I guess a tip for that, do you have anything to help a business owner who's like, I just don't know?
Well, I gave you a few areas where business revenue could come from outside of what a typical agency tends to focus on talking about. And so I would ask an agency where, let's use customer delight as an example, right? This is really about operational and communication stuff. So what I mean by customer delight, it might be, over delivering in certain ways that are really getting customers to go, wow, I knew I was buying this, but I wasn't expecting that. Wow, I love you. And so if you present that, hey, we're working on getting more leads in the door, but we also have some questions about, improving our customer delight stuff or more consistent referrals. Is that something you have any experience with? Just a simple question like that will help inform whether this is an agency that thinks beyond the sort of standard stuff. I think that's probably where I would start.
Wow, that's really helpful, because like I'm constantly trying to put myself into both these shoes on the top, and like there's two sort of perspectives here. There's the business, there's the agency. Putting myself into the shoes of the business or the agency, what would they be thinking? What are they dealing with? How are they going to be evaluating this? Because at the end of the day, the takeaway I'm hoping from this episode too is like I have a better idea, one, of my business and if it could potentially utilize an agency. Number two, if I decide I want an agency, or if I have an agency, am I going to get everything I possibly could out of it? What's the best ideal picture relationship, the best it could be? Like, are there revenue opportunities that are going to be open to me that I'm not aware of? A little bit of that feels like might need some humility, might need to be like, yes, my business might need this, but at the end of the day, it's like, look, the business wants to grow. What is it going to do to achieve those goals? What is it going to do to achieve its growth that it needs, that it has to go after, that it is hungering for? And some of them aren't really interested in growth, but the ones that are they evaluating a partnership as an opportunity for growth? So those are some of the things, in totality from this, I was looking at. Was there anything that we didn't talk about or we missed, David, that you wanted to mention?
I as you were just talking about this, one thing popped into my head, which is that we don't do direct client services anymore, except on a rare occasion when our arms are twisted. And we happen right now to be working with somebody in the home services industry. Now, if you're in that industry, you know that you are, or you believe you are, incredibly busy and have no time for any of the stuff we've been talking about. Okay. However, there are a few enlightened souls like the client who hired us, who, when they start thinking about their business in a different light, they had some personal goals. They had some, we're using the business as a vehicle to be able to invest in something specific in their future. They want to, spend time elsewhere in the world doing mission work, for people, those sorts of things. It really helped reposition why they actually would even think about going through a process like what I've been describing. Because ultimately, the business is there for another purpose other than just to exist, right? It's there because you have a mission to help people through the business. You have a goal to make, money or build generational wealth for your family, etc. And so when you sort of step back from every piece of the, marketing strategy versus tactic conversation that we've been having, and think about, what does this business mean to me in the first place, and why am I doing this? It really helps to then make the link between, is approaching my marketing differently really worth the time that it would take to do so, because of what my specific personal goals are with the business.
Wow, that's really interesting to consider too. That's like a different thing altogether. I wouldn't have even thought about in this episode. So thank you, David. Now, if let's say someone's like, all right, I want to follow up, I want to ask them a question, I want to learn more about you, I want to learn more about your company. You mentioned like find one of our licensees. How can someone reach out to you, connect with you, learn more?
Yeah, totally. We are easily found online at thepreparedgroup.com. And like I said, we don't do client services. Pretty much every week we are approached with, hey, can you help me with this project? And we are so pleased to support the agencies who are working with us by introducing those folks who are interested in this approach to them. And so I'm more than happy to chat with anybody who wants to reach out to understand this process a little bit more deeply. There's plenty of information on our site that sort of digs into the way that we do this. But if somebody wants to reach out through the website, they certainly can as well.
And if, let's say, there's an agency who's like, I kind of like this idea and they want to learn more, is there anything different for them, or just go through the website?
Yep, they can come to the website and they can go to the licensing page. So it's thepreparedgroup.com/licensing. And that's where you'll get all the details of the program that we have. And look, it's not what I have explained here is not a fit for everyone. If an agency has been looking for a way to be able to deliver the stuff that we've been talking about, we should talk. We may or may not be a good fit for you and your specific goals, but there's a process for figuring that out, and having a conversation is the first step.
Awesome. Well, everybody, I hope you got a lot out of this. I hope you're thinking about, well, how should I approach looking for an agency, or the relationship you have with your current agency. Thank you, everyone, for listening. David, thank you so much for coming on and helping us and really expanding this topic into a lot of depth. I think to be really helpful for everyone.
Yeah, indeed, Kevin. This has been a real treat. Thanks for the invitation.